All right, thanks, Pastor Tom, for your solid marital and relationship advice there. Appreciate that. Hey, how's it going? All right, that's where we're at. Well, my name's Brendan. I'm one of the crew from around here, and it's my job this morning to hold the microphone and go spend the next sort of 2-3 hours, however long it takes, going through this series called It's Complicated. And if I was to title a sermon, I just called this The Complicated Good. And I apologize in advance, but I have this thing I do whenever I'm preaching, which is I make everyone say words. I'm like, everyone say good. I do it all the time, and I actually can't stop now. It's a habit. So this is just going to happen. It's going to happen this morning. I'm going to keep doing it every third or fourth slide, but you just be prepared for that. If you don't want to say things, I won't be offended, but sometimes if it's not loud enough, I'll make you say it again, okay? Pastor Jonathan and Chloe are in Canberra today. They're with Impact Church there, which is like our church in Canberra. And Jono started off last week in this series, and he wound towards what is one of the core teachings of Christianity. It's not exclusive to Christianity. You see this in other belief systems, called the golden rule, that you would love others as you would have them love you, right? But within Christianity, it is taught, I think, in a different way than you see, and it's expressed differently than you see elsewhere. And today, I'm going to just move one layer deeper with that concept. So if you were here last week, that's a great start. If you weren't, I've summarized an entire 40-minute sermon in just a sentence there, and I definitely did not do it justice. So go listen to the podcast or watch it on YouTube after this one. But I want to tell a story. And it's a story that comes just after some teaching on the golden rule to kind of elaborate about it. So this story will go for a little bit. It's 4 slides long, so I'm warning you that this is a 4-slide long scripture that we're about to go through. And I'm going to just kind of explain it as we go. It's a very popular story, popular in the Christian faith. You've probably heard it even if you're not a Christian. So what I'd love for you to do is, if you can, if you've been a Christian for a while, try to listen to this story like you've never heard it before. If you've never heard it before, you're good. We can do this together. Let's go to the next slide. Let's start reading. Story is called the Good Samaritan. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. It's a bold move, testing the Son of God, but this guy thought today that was a good idea. An expert in the law is not a lawyer per se. The word law there refers to the Torah, the first part of the Bible. So this guy is an expert in the Bible. And he said to Jesus, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" Start with the easy question. "Well, what is written in the law?" Jesus said. "How do you read it?" And the man said, "Well, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with your strength, and with all your mind." And here you go. "Love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you're good." So here's the guy. The guy already starts by testing Jesus, and then he thinks, I'm going to test him some more. I'm going to poke the bear, as it were. He wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who's my neighbor?" So classic Jesus goes on and he doesn't answer the question, he tells a story. So this is the story Jesus told, and it's the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, I should just prefix this and say, we refer to this as a parable, maybe the parable of the Good Samaritan. There are a lot of scholars who believe it was actually a true story, a real story. It references real types of people, real places, and potentially, we don't know this for sure, but potentially this is actually a story that was known at the time by the people there. Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. All right, stop. Down from Jerusalem to Jericho. This road from Jerusalem to Jericho is a famous road at the time. It had become known by the phrase, the way of blood. Right, so that gives you some indication that it was actually known to be a treacherous road. It actually does descend down through the wilderness. I've been on this road myself. Now it actually has a nice highway there, so it's probably not as treacherous as it was. It's about 25 kilometers long, so by foot through, as you can see, I sort of put an image behind the text there to give you a sense of what it would be like to travel on this road. This was a hard, treacherous road to travel. So kind of no surprises that someone traveling on this road has been has been attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest, everyone say priest. I did it again. Happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So to a Levite, everyone say Levite. When he came to the place and saw him, also passed by on the other side. So let's just stop there. A priest and a Levite. So priests were kind of like the religious leaders of the time. Like religion in Israel, Jerusalem at this point was really the center, aside from the Roman Empire, the center of their society. And so this is kind of, you think about the top class. Like priests really sat at the top of society because they were the religious heads. Then beneath that were Levites. So Levites would work in the temple. They would like work as their profession in that space. So they were kind of like one rung below. And then the rung below that, you sort of had the lay person, the Jew, the average person. So priests, Levites, lay people. So Jesus kind of tells this subversive story. So you might have thought at first, okay, the priest is coming. All right, Jesus is going to fall in line and he's going to say the priest is the hero. But no, all right. The priest ignored him. Okay, that's not great. A Levite. Well, no, Levi wasn't any good either, so he ignored him too. And so everyone listening at this point is probably thinking, okay, classic Jesus, he's going to tell us that it was the lay person who was the person who actually was the hero in this story to help the poor, unfortunate man. And Jesus says, but a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, took pity on him. Now, Samaritans, many of you will understand this already, but Samaritans were a distinct ethnic group in Israel. They were different from the Jews. They sort of descended ethnically from Assyrian, combined with Jews. The Jews and Samaritans hated each other. They had not a love-hate relationship, just a hate-hate relationship. I don't know if you have one of those around your town anywhere, maybe a neighbor or something that you hate and they hate you, and it's just fine. It's a fine relationship to have. You can hate each other. It's less complicated that way. But here it is. Samaritans and Jews did not like each other. Jews saw Samaritans as sort of like traitorous to the Jewish way. Samaritans saw Jews as cruel and racist. They had a bad thing going on. So when Jesus tells this story, everyone's expecting Jesus to say, the priest didn't do it, the Levite didn't do it, but it was like a Jew. And he said, no, got you again. It was actually your enemy. The Samaritan's the one you hate. And this is what the Samaritan did. He went to him, bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, delicious. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn and took care of him. Then he took out 2 denarii. That's about a denarii was about a day's wage, so 2 days of income. Gave it to the innkeeper, said, look after him. When I return, I will reimburse you for any expense you may have. Which of these 3, Jesus starts talking back to the testing man here, which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell among the hands of robbers? And the expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Couldn't even say the word Samaritan. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. All right, cool. There's our story. When I think about like stories like this of kind of like sacrificial love, it's like this archetypal story of someone who did like this amazing act of kindness that cost them, and in the end, like great result. Story worked out awesome. It made it in the Bible, so that's got to be good for any story. And, this act of love, like that we kind of see, maybe you hear it in a sermon, like this one, where someone's like, some preacher is telling you, hey, I did this thing, it was really hard or expensive or difficult, and in the end, the result was this amazing thing happened. Or you might see that on social media, on Instagram, Facebook. All the stories of someone doing something awesome tend to have a great ending. They end in reward, they end in resolution, they end by the person who went out on a limb, did something sacrificial, did some great act of kindness, being rewarded with a happy ending. I have not experienced that many of those kind of stories in my life as it pertains to love. In fact, most of the times I've ever done something that I would consider to be a loving act didn't really turn out like that. In fact, they turned out in a very complicated way. Let me give you an example. So, the other week, I have a neighbor that lives, an actual neighbor, a neighbor that lives near me, single lady, Indigenous mom, kind of tough situation. Time to time, they kind of come over. She just kind of comes over and asks for help with things. And this afternoon, she came over to my house and she said, "Hey, I'm selling a washing machine. I see you have a ute." And I was like, "Oof, yeah, I do have a ute, yeah." It's the worst thing. You have a ute, you buy a ute, and then that's your life from then on, right? So just careful if you're ever considering it. Put a canopy on, much safer idea. I don't, it's unwise. She said, "You got a ute, can you help me? I've got to sell this washing machine. I need to take it somewhere. Can you do that?" And unfortunately, I had nothing on that afternoon, and I was like, "Ugh. Yep, I can do that. Yes, I guess I can help do that." Right. So go and do it. Go and gotta help her put the washing machine up, tie it up, drive to the place that she's going to drive there. She goes in her car, I go in mine. We get there and try to sell it. She's trying to sell it. She'd kind of negotiate it, and then it didn't work. There was a misunderstanding, and she actually couldn't sell it. So I just had to load it back up, and I had to take it back to her house and just sort of help her move it back inside. And that was the end of the story. That was my afternoon. That was the result. Not exactly something that I'm going to put on an Instagram reel of me doing some great act of kindness. It just went like that. It was kind of awkward. Most experiences I have actually end like that. I'm a parent. I have 3 children. I have a wife, right? In most of my interactions where I express love or opportunities, the reason that you are there to express love or have an opportunity to do that is because it was complicated in the first place. Because you're having a fight. Because the child is up in the middle of the night. Because someone is sick. Because someone has done something wrong to you. That's usually the very thing that precedes the act of love. Usually every act of love is preceded by a complicated situation. And quite often, they don't end with this great reward. My youngest son was up at just 3:40 this morning. That's when he decided to start the day. I was up with him and just trying to get him back to sleep. And it was just terrible. Everything about it. I was in bed with him and he was upset. I was upset. We were all upset together. He didn't go back to sleep. Neither did I. And that's how we started the day. There was no a moment where it was I just love and appreciate your dad and all that you do for me. And I just love that you give your life for me. And we both went back to sleep and I felt great. There wasn't a resolution like that. We just started the day. Point number 1 here today, possibly the worst point that I'm going to have in a sermon ever. Loving is complicated. It's not actually an awesome point for a sermon, so I apologize. I'll try and make the next 2 a bit better. But loving is complicated. Think of the Good Samaritan story. We glossed over it pretty quickly, and if you've heard it before, you just kind of tend to make it a little bit of a fairy tale. It's just this amazing man, and there was a guy that was sick, and he bandaged him and took him and paid for his stuff. But let's think about the story a bit. Let me just let you in on me for a bit. So this isn't going to be one of those sermons where you're going to walk away thinking Brendan's awesome. You're actually going to think the opposite, and why has that guy got a microphone? So let me just get that out of the way. In this story, you're the Good Samaritan, I'm on the way somewhere. I'm on the way home from work. I'm trying to get somewhere, and I've got something to do. And I'm walk along, and there's a body on the side of the road. I've seen it now. I guess I should do something about this, right? I can't pretend I haven't seen that. And I go over, and I just kick it, and he's still alive. Well, if he was dead, he's not getting any deader, right? So there's nothing you can do. You just have to scooch it off to the side of the road or maybe bury for, whatever, in a shallow grave. But he's still alive, so I have to do something now. And I get him, and I'm he's got all these wounds. I was saving that oil. That oil and wine was expensive, and I was saving it for dinner. And now, I'm going to have to use it on this guy. And so now I'm using my oil and wine, and he can't walk. So now I don't get to use my donkey. He's got to use my donkey, and I have to walk now. So this is my reward for this scenario. I take this guy to the innkeeper, and he says, "Well, who's going to pay for this?" And I'm like, what do you mean? I brought him here. I've used my oil and wine. Can't you, why don't you chip in here? The innkeeper's like, no, there's no publicly subsidized healthcare in this scenario. Someone's got to foot the bill. And it's well, how much? It's well, probably a couple of days' wage, and I'm not a pastor, so that's still a fair bit of money. Sorry, that's a rough joke. It's going to be $600 or $700. And I'm oh, geez, what a day. 2 days' wage. I don't know. For some of you, that's just thousands of dollars, I'm sure, right? Like, I'm sure it is. But whatever that is, it's hundreds of dollars. Like, it was actually, if you think about it, and I know it's just a story, but it was complicated at the time. The Samaritan going through this stuff is not just having an incredible time. And you don't actually even read that at the end of the story, the guy gets better and comes back and thanks the Good Samaritan. Oh, thanks for saving my life. And, my wife and kids are going to be so happy that their father's still. You don't even hear that part, right? It's a complicated story when you really think about it. And so much of our lives, so many situations, so many relationships, and almost all acts of love that we commit are complicated. All right, great point, Brendan. Thank you for that point. Glad I rocked up to church this morning. No, sorry, I'm just saying it was actually a terrible point and you don't need to clap it. But I guess what then is the foundation for that? How do we deal with that? If that is the case, that most things are complicated, they're hard to deal with, even the Good Samaritan, that he's got a bad, complicated situation, how do I deal with that? Well, I want to read you a scripture, and this one comes from Romans chapter 8, and it goes a bit like this. I'll read from this screen. And we know that in all things God works for the good. Everyone say good. Everyone say good. Of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. When we walk in his purpose, we know that all the things, all the complicated things, all the complicated situations, all the complicated relationships that I have will work for good. And I ultimately believe this, that God's will, that God is a loving, kind, gracious Father, and his will is blessing, is to bless, and is to pour out love. I believe that. The Bible makes it clear that if we walk in his ways, we can experience blessing. However, it's not complete. Because many of the things and all of the things, they don't seem very good at the time. So what is the good? What is the good that God is working towards? Well, it's actually just described in the next verse. So let's read the next verse. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. So let's think about this. That last part, he might be firstborn among many brothers, is actually a way of sort of communicating this idea of being a child of God. So he may be a child of God, but he would be predestined to be conformed, to be made like Jesus. That in all things God is working for your good. What is the good? That you would be made like Jesus. If you are not a Christian here, like you're watching this or listening in, you're not a Christian here, at this point in the sermon, like the first point you can probably relate to, like at this point now, you can probably just, you can kind of be let off from this one and just kind of watch and listen a little bit to what it actually means. Because if you are a Christian, I'm about to tell you what the good is and what it's like to understand what God's good is for your life, to be conformed to the image of Jesus. I have 3 sons, right? And when I think about, so I keep using parenting analogies here, like I'll stop eventually here. If you're not a parent, sorry. I have kids, and if you're like this, you probably think there might be things about them that I want them to develop. I want them to have things. There's a good that I want them to conform to, right? So for instance, one of those things I think about with my kids, I want them to be resilient. That's a good quality, good characteristic. I want them to have some resilience. So how do I go about that? As a dad, apparently a loving dad, I don't like the early mornings, but generally I'm okay. As a dad, how do I go about letting my boys develop resilience? Do I lecture them? Is that good? Is that a good parenting strategy? Pastor Chaz, Fran over there, lecturing your children. Is that always a good strategy to get them to learn something? No, they're getting a few head shakes and maybe from Pastor Fran. I have found it pretty ineffective so far, right? Especially my 1-year-old not responding well to the lectures yet. Lecture, not so good. At times, maybe I could try and demonstrate resilience to them, like show them that I'm resilient. If I have any of that, maybe I can try and show them. really what I do is I allow them to walk through situations where they have to develop it on their own. So I'm playing outside in the driveway, someone falls off a bike, goes down, there's a scraped knee. Of course, I see if they're okay. I stop laughing if it was funny, and then I pick them up and say, "All right, mate, you're okay. Let's keep going." Right? I mean, most parents do that. What are you trying to do in that moment? Because if you did the opposite, if you said, "Oh, cool, okay, look, you've hurt yourself. What we're going to do now is stop all this activity. We're going to go away. We're going to have a cry, have a long cry about this." I mean, I'm under the assumption that they're actually okay, that it's just a scraped knee. I'm not cruel. But what we do is we allow our children to develop qualities and characteristics by allowing them to walk through situations that bring that out of them, that force them to grow into that resilience. I really believe that God is a good Father and that He works in all things for our good. Maybe God, in His purpose for your life and my life, allows the complicated things, the complicated relationships, the complicated situations, maybe He allows them to arise for your good. Because in those situations, what does it force you to do? Do you think that we learn patience from having perfect relationships, from having perfect neighbors? Do you think we learn kindness from having perfect people scattered throughout our lives? Do you think we learn mercy because God fills our life with people who don't need any mercy? I believe that God has put I within His purpose in situations, and this does not explain every situation for everything, so don't read it quite that broadly, but I believe He allows us, and one of the primary mechanisms that He uses for our good are the people and the complicated situations around us. Maybe God has orchestrated your spouse. If you are, no, not everyone's married here, but if you are, maybe there's some orchestration there. That your spouse doesn't have every perfect quality in the world. Maybe they do and you're blessed, right? But maybe they don't. Maybe there are weaknesses there. Maybe there are frustrations that you would give your right arm for them not to have. Maybe they don't meet all your conditions. But I tell you this, no one develops unconditional love when someone meets all of your conditions. And maybe, I think that this thought is incredibly freeing thought, especially, so let's just stick to the marriage thing just for a second. I won't spend long on this. If the foundation for marriage, if we were to take as the foundation of the good of marriage was that it would be marital bliss, that it's going to be awesome all the time, that my marriage is a pleasure center for me to have a wonderful life, if that was the core foundation of marriage, anytime I came across something that was a weakness, was a challenge, was a flaw in my partner, it would be reason to be distraught. We're just not compatible. It's not the person I thought I married. It's just not the right thing. And what would I do with that? I'd probably look for escape. I performed the ceremony of a couple last week. I married them. They were in this church. And I can imagine, give it a couple of months, they're going to encounter some things about each other that they did not know existed, maybe even a couple of days, right? And they're already discovering like, oh my goodness, snoring. That's a thing that, and you begin to encounter things in your partner. And if for them, and especially I think as you're younger, like if for them in their young days, they're thinking like, wait a second, this isn't all bliss. It would be reason to panic and to be distraught. But if they know that at the core foundation, that marriage even in this earth is one of God's primary tools to conform you to the image of Jesus, to make you more patient, to make you more kind, to make you more merciful, to make you more gracious. If that was one of the foundations for marriage, it totally changes the situation. I'm not saying it makes it easy. I'm not saying that makes it romantic, and I'm not saying it makes everything okay, right? So don't just stay with me here. But what it does is it means those very things in my partner are there, and they may be there for my good, for me to develop patience. I personally, people say to me, "Bro, I think you're a really patient guy." People describe me as patient. And I say, I wasn't. I didn't used to be patient, right? But like 12 years of marriage and 3 kids later, I am. I actually feel like I can say I've grown patience. And when did I grow that patience? I grew it in the complicated situations of day-to-day marriage and parenting. I grew it at 3 o'clock in the morning on day 300 of my child not sleeping through the night. This is when God was just drawing it out of me and drawing it out and sort of suppressing, and instead of being anger, and at first I would be angry and I'd be angry, but less over time as God began to work in my life, the anger started to subside and I started to feel love and I felt kindness and I became more of a gentle father. I would become patient and tired, but patient. And God would use in my life, my children, my spouse, and for many of us, it's not children and spouse. You don't have either of those. Maybe it's your friend, maybe it's your family, maybe it's parents, maybe it's sibling, maybe it's your actual neighbors, maybe it's colleagues, maybe it's the people God is calling you to reach, that are there in your life, and God is using them to draw out of you, to take away the parts of you that are not conforming you to Jesus, and He's going to bring into your life, and by His grace, cause you to become more like Him. All right, stop clapping now. That's enough. It is one of the primary ways that God conforms us for His good. And His good in your life is that you would develop patience and kindness and mercy and grace. And those things are developed when? When you need to show mercy. When do you need to show mercy? When someone has wronged you. When someone has done something wrong to you and you need to not give them what they deserve, that harsh word, that criticism, that nasty look, when they deserve that, and you sense God's Spirit and say, God, how would I be more like your son in this moment? How would I be more like your daughter in this moment? And extend to them mercy. Extend to them grace. I think some of us, you might even feel this. You might even feel that as you look in your life, because not everything is awesome, because there are complications. My job's not amazing, like my children, the situation is not actually awesome all of the time. Some people think that in those situations that they have strayed from the purpose and will of God in their life. That just because not everything is awesome all the time, that I have strayed from God's will. Clearly, I took a wrong step somewhere, and I'm here to tell you today, you could be right in the center of God's purpose for your life, even if not everything is great all of the time. I know that makes sense and that rings true, but that is a really freeing thought. Let's go to the next slide, the next couple of slides there. God does pour out blessings. I really do believe that. And often the complicated situations are temporary and they move past our lives as God brings something into us and then they move along. And God uses what we develop in those situations to be a blessing for everyone from then on. I think in your life, the situations God brings, He may, through a season, allow you to draw out a characteristic of Jesus in your life. And then for the rest of your life, you have a blessing to pour out on other people from then onwards. You are more like Jesus in every scenario from then on. Maybe I don't have all the money in the world. Maybe I don't have all these maybe I have struggles in this life. You might still be in God's purpose and His will, walking with God through those situations, because what He is doing is teaching you to be more like Him. Number 1, loving is complicated. Number 2, God is producing good in me. And number 3, I'll close with this. God rescues me. If those first 2 points are true, that loving is hard, and number 2, God is producing good in me, I did say the points are going to get better. The first 2 actually not very strong. They're not actually super encouraging points, are they? Right? Like that loving is hard work. And through that hard work, I'm growing. You're like, okay, cool. Like, this is still hard, actually. This is still actually not an awesomely encouraging sermon yet, is it? And if I was to end there, it actually wouldn't be wonderful news, because what would the takeaway message be at this point? If we were just to cut right now, it would be, okay, cool, well, I guess I need to just grit my teeth, work harder, try to be more positive about the situation, about the things that are going on in my life, and try to just understand that God's doing good in me, and I just need to work harder. I need to love more. I need to be more sacrificial. I need to be more kind. I need just to dig deeper and be better. When we read the Good Samaritan story, our inclination, all of us, at first, is to do what? Is to identify with the Good Samaritan and say, yeah, like that's what I need to be like. And ultimately we do, right? There's a step before that. Just before you identify in that story with the Good Samaritan and start looking around and thinking like, okay, who can I be a Good Samaritan towards? There's a step before that. And it's recognizing that you and I in this story to begin with are not the Good Samaritan. You and I are the man on the side of the road. You and I are the complicated ones. That, I know we all have a good opinion of ourselves, or maybe we do. You're complicated. Loving you is complicated. Loving me is complicated, right? Ask my wife, right? Loving me is a complicated thing. It's a hard thing to do. And believe me, God is producing a lot of good in my wife's life because of the fact she married me, right? So she's getting a lot of good, and she's become a lot more like Jesus because of me. So she should be grateful. I don't know. You and I, in and of our own devices, you know what? If you think about it, you're like, you know what? I am trying to learn those lessons. I am trying to be good. I'm trying to be hard. It's really hard. I'm learning these lessons very slowly, though. I feel like I can't have got all these issues. Like at the core of me, I don't always want to do that. And that is the case for all of us, that you and I have fallen short of His perfection, of being the perfect Good Samaritan. We are not that. You are not that. I am not that. You and I in this story are much more likely to identify with the person who actually needs rescuing. I am the one who needs mercy. I am the one who needs grace. I am the one who needs patience. I need someone to save and restore me from the inside out. And only once you have been saved, restored, resurrected even with God, can you have what it takes on the inside to be a Good Samaritan, to love unlovable people, to love complicated people, to extend mercy where it's not deserved, to give grace where it's not deserved, to be patient with people who are tough. Only from a foundation and from the inner place where God has rescued your life can you have the motivation and the sustenance that you need to be that person. God came from heaven. From heaven, God came to earth. He looked down on the earth and the complicated mess that we were in. And how did He do it? He came, and as a perfect sacrifice, Jesus died on the cross for our sin so that our sin could be taken away. All right, I know that sounds pretty spiritual. That's a really kind of spiritual, biblical set of language. But what it means is that at the core of us, there is something wrong and something dark. And through what Jesus did on the cross, He takes it away, throws it away, and restores your heart. He turns graves into garden. You know, He turns the mourning to dancing, right? And He can, and He does do it for you. Maybe you've never actually accepted that. Maybe it's just this is a concept and you've been listening. But when I said earlier, if you're not a Christian, the good that God is doing, where does it start? It doesn't start with the complicated situations around you. It doesn't start by you going out and trying to learn to love other people. It actually starts when you learn that God loved you first. and that he restores you. Let me read a scripture. This comes from Romans. I love this one. It says, "But God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." While you and I, other scriptures say, while we were dead in our sin, he made us alive together with Christ. And at the core of the Christian faith is not just going out and doing good works. It's not going out just trying to be a good Samaritan on your own. It's realizing that I can only be that good Samaritan when God has first done it in me, in my heart. In those moments, I guarantee one of them's coming this week. Now that I've preached the message, I've set you all up for this. There's a moment coming this week. Maybe it's at 3 a.m., maybe it's at 2 p.m. I don't know what time of the day it's going to come, but there will come a moment this week where he reaches in on you and says, hey, a bit of patience, or there's a bit of selfishness we need to take care of, right? What's the foundation for that? It's knowing that once you get rid of that selfishness and learn that patience, once you do that, that's not the thing that makes you right before God. That's not what gets you into heaven. That's not what saves you. You are saved before that. You are saved by God, by his grace. Your sin can be removed, and from that place, then God gets to work in our lives, just slowly but surely, using the situations, using the complications of day-to-day life, of parenting, of marriage, of strangers, of friends, of work, of play, of neighbors. God uses each one of those to continually transform you and your heart, that you would be what? Conformed to the image of Jesus, and be a blessing to everyone around you. Let me close with this question. In what relationships, and what complicated relationships, is God producing good in me? We know why he's doing it. We know how he's doing it. And you know the foundation for it now. But as you go into this week, what does that look like? How is God doing that? The last thing I would suggest, if everyone, Christian not, if you want something to do about this, if you're thinking about this like through the week, read Romans chapter 8. That's the scriptures I use, but if you read that whole passage, it's a bit more than I go through in a sermon. Read through that every day this week. If you don't have something that you are going to read this week, if you're not in the middle of a Bible plan, or you don't read your Bible like regularly, Romans 8, start with that. Read it every day this week, and go back to Luke 10 with the Good Samaritan, and have a read through that as well. And let God be transforming you from the inside out. All right.